You are listening to The Drop, a.k.a. the Tortured Hockey Fan Department. You can listen to us every Tuesday and Friday, wherever you get your audio podcasts, as well as the NHL and ESPN YouTube. Speaking of tortured hockey fandoms, let's look at the second half of the season. Let's give our predictions in the East and the West, which teams will fall out, which teams will get in. It's going to be a wild ride, honestly, no pun intended there, especially in the wild card races in the East and the West. But taking a look at the Eastern Conference, right now in the wild card, you have the Red Wings and the Leafs deadlocked at 58 points as of Monday. And the Islanders, Penguins, Devils, and Capitals, 6 points out, but all trying to stay in the race. So which bubble team do you believe will make the playoffs in the East, Wish?
All right. Give me the Devs. Got the puck behind me over here. Look, I know it's a homer pick, but Jack Hughes coming back to that lineup transforms the Devils. It makes them reset their whole lineup. They're going to be so much better offensively with him back. He is the engine that drives everything for them. They're going to have to figure out the goaltending thing if it doesn't shore up, and they do have the cap space to do so. They have a 26.5% chance of making the playoffs based on Stathletes. You have to remember, you talked about the wild card teams. The Philadelphia Flyers stumbled into the break, as we'll talk about in a second, which could open up one of those spots in the Metropolitan Division. So I'm going to take the Devils to rally for a playoff spot where a lot of people thought they'd end up this season anyway.
Well, I mentioned the point totals for the Leafs and the Wings, who are in the wild card position. The Flyers, third place in the Metro at 56 points. The Islanders and Devils 52 and 51. So that's actually a closer gap to get to third in the Metro as opposed to the wild card. What about the Flyers? Are they in or out?
They're out. I mean, look, they were trending down beginning before the All-Star break. They had lost 5 in a row. Obviously, the Carter Hart situation, which we don't want to talk about in hockey terms, but have to acknowledge, does impact this team. He's one of their starting goaltenders. So, they were punching above their weight regardless this season, Arda, for most of the year. Obviously, John Tortorella is going to keep this team competitive and keep them in a playoff race. But they have a less than 50% chance of making the playoffs right now. And given how many teams that are Metro Division teams are chasing that spot, the Devils, the Penguins, the Islanders, I just don't imagine the Flyers are going to be able to maintain a playoff spot for the rest of the season. And listen, we didn't expect them to anyway. They've been one of the more pleasant surprises in the first half. But in the second half, I think they will probably concede that top 3 Metro spot to one of those 3 teams.
I hope you're wrong, because I want maximum chaos in the playoffs. I'd love nothing more than to hear what Torts has to say throughout the postseason. The Western Conference playoff picture, I'm saying the Kings are staying in. They are currently in a wild card spot, 56 points. The Blues and Preds, 54, hot on their heels. This wild card race will probably go down to the very last day of the season. But to me, you change the coach. You're looking to make improvements. Players always feel like they got to step up for the new bench boss in the room. That might be the jolt that the Kings need. We're not that far off from the team that everyone was claiming to be cup contenders based on the start that they had and the best forward depth in the league. These were conversations that we weren't having that long ago. But now, since they're stumbling, people are asking those questions. But to me, the right changes are being made. Maybe they add a piece or two at the trade deadline, and all of a sudden they're a contending team again. What do you think?
I think that's true. And, the teams that are behind them in the standings right now, it's just like from week to week, you never know what the hell they are. Like the Blues look like they were dead to rights. Then they come back and rally before the All-Star break. The Predators week to week look like a different team offensively. I can't depend on the Kraken to really be a consistent team down the stretch. And, then there's the Coyotes that as soon as they get out of Mullet Arena, they fall apart. So if you're telling me if you're asking me which team do I have the most faith in to make the playoffs, it's probably still the Kings. And then, by the way, Arda, if they do finish in the wild card, they probably avoid the Edmonton Oilers in the first round. So maybe just don't try too hard, right? But try hard enough to make the playoffs.
Yes, so that you can avoid that team that continuously has defeated you in recent memory in the postseason. Speaking of the St. Louis Blues, Doug Armstrong recently did an interview, and he was asked, listen, if things stay the same, what will you be at the trade deadline? Will you be buyers? Will you be sellers? And his response essentially was, we're going to stay neutral. To me, if that is the case, they accept calls, whatever. But if they remain neutral, that's the team based on all the other teams that are circling around them that I would say that's the team I'm picking to drop out. They're currently at 54 points. They're tied with the Predators. The Predators lose out on the tiebreak currently, but that's the team I'm saying. What about you?
Yeah, I don't think the Blues are going to be a playoff team either. When I look at that gaggle of teams that are behind the Kings for that last wild card spot, I'm still saying the Nashville Predators. I picked them to make the playoffs before the season. I just think their goaltending at the end of the day is stronger than anybody else around the bubble. And I also think that offensively, if they can find that extra gear that they had earlier this season under new coach Andrew Brunette, maybe add a piece if Barry Trotz believes in this team around the deadline, then they'll find a way to sneak in. Be probably a sacrificial lamb for whoever they play in the first round, but sneak in nonetheless.
By the way, if you want our thoughts on the Todd McClellan coaching change, Sean Monahan trade, that was our previous podcast. It was a live show right after the All-Star game.
Yeah.
That is in our archives right now, so you can have a listen. That was a special Saturday live show. Shout out to our crew. That was a great production. So the reason I bring that up is because now let's talk about more trades. We're approaching the trade deadline. You mentioned we might get tumbleweeds at the trade deadline on our last show because of the names that have already moved. But give me a name, Wish, that you believe is a lock, a guarantee to be moved at the trade deadline.
Well, that's just the thing. Like we want there to be action. There could be a Jake Gensel trade. There could be a Marc-Andre Fleury trade. Who knows what could happen? But those are maybes. You want a guarantee. I guarantee you Chris Tanev's getting traded from the Calgary Flames, okay? Like the Flames are clearly in a selling mood. They shipped out Elias Lindholm, obviously, to the Vancouver Canucks. They're moving on to the next phase of whatever this franchise is going to be. Chris Tanev, he's 34 years old. He's signed through this season. He's a UFA after the season and could be an incredibly important last piece of the puzzle defensively for a contending team. Or there's been some talk that the Ottawa Senators or a team like that could be in the market for Chris Tanev, maybe doing that, acquire the UFA before UFA season to then keep him around for next season and seasons after that. He makes 4.5 on the cap for the Flames. They've not retained salary on any other move this year so far, I don't think. So they could retain a little bit, get a little bit more for him, but I definitely think Chris Tanev will not be a Calgary Flame after the trade deadline.
I'm going to go completely off the board, and maybe the goaltender in Calgary or two, who knows, might be involved in this. I'm going to say at least 3 goaltenders will be moved at the trade deadline. This is going to be a goalie-heavy trade deadline. We're going to see there. Look, let's be honest. There are a lot of teams that could use an upgrade in goaltending, a lot of playoff teams that could use an upgrade between the pipes, and there are a lot of goaltenders out there that people are probably already fielding calls, taking calls, etc. So based on the market, based on the supply and demand, the NHL goaltender economics, that's what I'm saying. At least 3. That's my over-under.
Safe bet, man. It's a safe bet. I mean, you think about the Kings, the Devils, Leafs maybe. Like there's a ton of teams that could certainly use that extra body in the crease and kind of do it like Vegas did and hope that one of those guys gets hot at the right time like they did last year. So I agree with you, man. I think it's going to be a pretty hot goalie market.
One bold prediction.
All right, my bold prediction is that the Winnipeg Jets make the Western Conference Final. I'm a believer in the Jets. I love the Monahan trade. I think that really is a nice piece and a way to address the deficit they had at second line center after the Dubois trade last year. Good guy, great story, good vibes. Sometimes about vibes, Arda. But more than that, they're just like one of the stoutest defensive teams that we have in the league this year in front of what I think is the best goalie in the league in Connor Hellebuck. That alone is going to give them the bedrock on which they can try to maybe win a couple rounds in the West. I say they make the Western Conference Final. They may not win against whoever comes out of the Pacific, but the Jets are for real, man. They're a real good hockey team.
Let me riff on that. The Winnipeg Jets make the Western Conference Final, and they get stopped by the Vancouver Canucks, who make it to the Stanley Cup Final, and they will meet the Boston Bruins.
Whoa!
In a rematch of 2011. What, Wish, will happen to the city of Vancouver if that were to happen? What is going to happen, man? What will the citizens of Vancouver do?
Oh, I think it'll be the complete opposite. Instead of burning the city down, they will douse it with champagne, undoubtedly. Because I think if the Canucks and Bruins play in the Stanley Cup Final, the Canucks are going to win the Stanley Cup. But to do that, Arda, they're going to have to beat the juggernaut Oilers, my Stanley Cup picks. So I don't believe that your fantasy will come to fruition.
There it is. Let us know in the comments, by the way. We're trying to get a little bit more active in the YouTube comments, so feel free to chirp us, agree with us, whatever comes to mind. We will be there to continue the conversation along. That about does it for us here on this edition of The Drop. Every Tuesday, Friday, don't forget, wherever you get your audio podcasts as well, the NHL on ESPN YouTube. Should we officially change our name to the Tortured Hockey Fan Department?
Only if we want to get back at an ex. That's, Taylor dropped the name of the album. Everybody assumed she was entering her literary era, but no, it's a reference to her ex, which is beautiful.
And a group chat, right? Is that what that is?
Yeah,
like
in a group chat with Paul Mescal. Again, like, never underestimate what an assassin this person is when it comes to previous relationships. Yeah. I love it. That's why I love her.
Not a chance I want to mess with the Swifties ever. Bye, everyone.
Take care.